All right, here we go with chapter 14. We've started the project, we've gone through the project, we have controlled and monitored the project, and now finally we're going to close the project. So what do we need to do in this chapter? We need to identify different types of project closures and why they happen, understand the challenges of closing out a project, explain the importance of doing a project audit, know how to use project retrospects to obtain lessons learned and what we're going to use lessons learned for. Kind of what we hinted at in the last one is stuff that we've learned from this project that we can take on to future ones. Assess the level of the company's project management procedures, provide useful advice for conducting team performance reviews, and then provide useful advice for conducting performance reviews for project members. Chapter outline, again, we're going to go through project closure, the wrap-up activities, audits, the big picture, and post-implementation evaluation. So project closure and review of deliverables. So now we've handed in our deliverables. We're going to wrap up and do our closure activities, looking at the facilities, customer, vendor reports. We're going to do project audit, and we're going to look at performance evaluation. And that's all then going to go into our project archives or database to help us build up and be prepared for our next project. Why do projects close? So we have normal closure. We've come to the end of the project. Premature closure. So something's maybe happened to cause us to have to close out early. Perpetual closure. So there's kind of phased steps of the project and we're closing it off and moving on to whatever the next one is. Failed projects. Things just didn't go right and we're just going to cut it off. And then a change of priorities. So this seemed important at the time, but now the priorities of the organization have changed and we're going to go on to something else. Wrap up closure activities. Project closure usually includes the following 6 major activities. So getting delivery acceptance from the customer. And this is one I really emphasize when you're doing a real project. You can't just hand the deliverable to the client and expect that things are done. They may not be expecting what you gave them, or it might not be to the level they were expecting, or they were expecting something else. And if we're going to get paid, they have to accept what we've done, or if we're going to close it out, they have to accept what we've done. So we need to make sure that we've presented it to them, and yes, they've accepted it, and probably there's going to be some kind of sign-off and agreement. Then we're going to shut off our resources and release them to new uses. If we have a specific project team, or we've had people that we've brought on for this from other functional areas, we're going to probably send them back. Reassigning the team members, closing accounts and seeing that all the bills are paid. So we've got money in different accounts, funds in all those different pockets that we talked about. So we make sure all the bills are paid because maybe they're not necessarily due yet. As I talked about, we could have different terms for those payments, but make sure everything is paid. Everything to do with this project is now cleared out and we can completely close it off. We can look at what the profit actually is after paying out all the expenses. Delivering the project to the customer. If it's an actual product, we're going to deliver that. If it's a document, we're going to make sure they have it. And then creating a final report that's kind of going to summarize what we've done. So we would have a closure checklist to make sure that we've gone through all these stages and everything is done before we complete it as part of this document. And these are the things that would be in it. So has schedule for reducing project staff been developed and accepted? Has staff been released or notified of their new assignment? Performance reviews for them, and then the stuff to do with your vendors and contractors. So have performance reviews been done on them? Have project accounts been finalized and bills paid? Customers and users, has the customer signed off? Has an in-depth project review and evaluation interview been done with the customer? So how did they feel about how we did? Have the users been interviewed to assess their satisfaction with the deliverables, with the project team, with the vendors? Again, how did it go? Do they have everything they need? Do they feel they have the support, the training, the maintenance? Making sure they have all those pieces so that they're satisfied and they're going to use us again. Or that if they're not, that we can rectify the situation and we know that we're not really closed off yet. We need to fix those things. And equipment and facilities. So has the project resources been transferred to other projects? The physical equipment, materials, all those things. Have the rental or leased equipment agreements been closed off? Anything that we borrowed or leased, has it been sent back and everything closed off so we know that, if there was work or costs associated with those, everything is done and we don't have any loose ends, is kind of what we're trying to get at here. And then has the date for the closure review been set and the stakeholders been notified? So all the stakeholders of your project, has there been the review of basically everything that's gone on in this final report? And those that need to be there, have they been told? And then attach any comments or links to any tasks you feel need explanation. So if anything, for instance, when we talk about the customers or users having open items that we had to fulfill, extra support, maintenance agreements or requirements that we still will continue beyond this project, we would have those attached so that everybody is on the same page of what's going on. Project audits. So use performance measures and forecast data, explain what the project successes were, and review why the project was selected. Include a reassessment of the project's role in the organizational priorities. So now that we've done it, how it fits into what we were trying to do and what it's done for the organization's priorities. Include a check on organizational culture to ensure that it facilitates the type of project being implemented, can be performed while the project is in process or after the project is completed. So we may do this kind of as part of things in process audits, right? And in-process audits are great. We're going to get to a point where we're going to talk about things in the Agile framework, so we're going to be working in those circles. And when you're in those circles kind of Agile framework and the thinking of we're going to constantly be iterating, it's going to be more in process. And then finally at the end, when everything is handed off, one final post-project audit, which is going to be more detailed of all the steps. Maybe there are things next time that we don't need to do that we did do this time kind of in our iterations because we realized that they're not an effective step, and emphasize on improving the management for future projects. And that's exactly what I just said there, right? So maybe we've done things in a way that we see we can either take those steps out or different steps could happen and be more effective. Guidelines for conducting the project audit. So how are we going to conduct this audit at the end? Or if it's an in process one, the philosophy must be that the project audit is not a witch hunt. So we're not trying to find out what went wrong or who did things wrong. It's to basically understand, and part of it to make sure we're taking things so that we have lessons learned in the future. Comment about individuals or groups participating in the project should be minimized. Audit activities should be sensitive to human emotions and reactions, because people are going to feel that something's going on, and that maybe they feel like they're being watched or that things they're doing are being questioned. So we have to do it in an appropriate way. And this is that, sensitivity, the portion that we kind of talked about last week, understanding how people react to things, understanding their personalities, and how to best approach them. The accuracy of the data should be verifiable. So it's got to be objective in some way as opposed to just subjective. Senior management should announce the support for the project audit, that they agree this should be happening. The objective of the project audits is not to prosecute, but to learn and conserve valuable organizational resources when mistakes have been made, and the audit should be completed as quickly as possible. So project audit process. Step 1, we're going to initiate staffing and look at what's going on. Step 2, we're going to collect and analyze data. And step 3, we're going to report out on what we found. Common outline for project audit reports, so classification, which is basically like what's going on with this project, what is it, what kind of project is it, analysis, what was supposed to happen in the project, recommendations, so what are we going to do to improve next time, lessons learned, so reminders of mistakes and retrospects, things that we would do differently, and then backup of any data. Project retrospect, so what is that? Looking at specific efforts identified in our lessons learned. An independent trainer or facilitator acts as a guide who, what are they going to do? They're going to lead the project team through analysis of the project activities. So what did we do? What worked? What didn't work? Having questionnaires to focus on project operations and how the organization's culture impacted the project's success or failure. Remembering that different companies, I kind of talked about relationships before, have different visions and different cultures about them, and sometimes they impact on how things can happen. Again, we're going to talk about Agile in the coming weeks, and a lot of companies struggle to go to Agile methodology because it really is this kind of iteration, and we need to all be a part of it and be willing to speak up, and it kind of takes away the project manager role and puts more focus on the individuals within the project, so they need to feel empowered. Lead the team through the retrospective session, works with the team to develop a system to prioritize information for disparate recipients. So now that we've gone through it all, who needs to know this information that we've kind of come up with? So here is an example of the project process review questionnaire, where the project objectives and strategic intent of the project clearly explained and communicated. So do we know when we went in that we understood what was happening? Were the objectives and strategy in alignment? Were stakeholders identified and included in the plan? So we're really going through all the stages that we talked about as we went through everything, and just kind of making comment if there are things that we could do better next time or things that didn't work. Were people with the right skill sets assigned to the project? And if they weren't, we're going to explain here why that was. Maybe they weren't necessarily available, or we didn't exactly understand what the task was, so the person we put on it maybe wasn't the best person at that time, and we know for next time. Were time estimates reasonable and achievable? Were the risks appropriately identified? All of our chapters here kind of come back as we're doing this retrospective audit. Did outside contractors' performance expected? Were communication methods appropriate, and so on? Is customer satisfied? Are customers using it? Were the project objectives met? Are stakeholders satisfied? Has customer or sponsor accepted a formal statement of the terms of the project charter and scope have been met? Were the schedule, budget, and scope standards met? And is there any one important area that needs to be reviewed and improved upon? Can you identify the cause? So was there something that just really kind of made this project difficult that we could change how we do, or look at other ways, benchmark how other areas in the company or other companies do it, so that we don't have that same problem next? Organizational culture review. We're getting down to the people here. Was the organizational culture supportive for this type of project? So did they agree with it? Is it something that the organization accepts? Sometimes what we're trying to do, because of who's focusing on it and changing priorities in the company, it's difficult to get that support because the people within aren't necessarily where we need them to be yet. Was senior management support adequate? Were people with the right skills assigned? Did the project office help or hinder? Was training for this provided? Was the project staff properly reassigned afterwards? And was human resources office helpful in finding new assignments? Project audits. So what is the big picture? What are we trying to do here? The purpose of all maturity models are to enable organizations to assess their progress in implementing the best practices in industry and moving to improvement. So we're trying to learn as we go along. And again, this kind of starts to move us to that agile mindset, and that we want to learn and be flexible and change where need be. And the way we do that is reviewing kind of a retrospective approach of how things went. You've got your project maturity model developed by the Project Management Institute called the OPM, and we'll take a look at that. And it's divided into a continuum of growth levels. So where is our company now, and where are we going to be? How are we going to move there from, initial stages of really project management right up to you've got an optimized system where you know it's going to work for you. And here are those steps. So ad hoc project management is kind of where we start, probably a smaller company. And then as you're moving up, you're going to have more refined and defined roles and the ability to smoothly run a project within different areas of the company, because you know what the skill set is, and you really have this set of documents that you've put together and these lessons learned, and your ability to forecast, to schedule, and to make recommendations up front is easier because you have more experience and you have more of a framework to be able to do it. Post-implementation evaluation. So now everything is implemented, we're done. And what's the purpose of project evaluation? To assess how well the project team members, and project manager perform. So we're doing a lot of evaluating here as we close with the project. We're trying to grow and mature and see, not just from the framework of things, but also from the people, how they did, how they can improve, and if warranted, what their merit should be for things. So we're going to do a team evaluation, and we're going to base that on the achievements of the project objectives according to time, cost, and specification. It's less common to assess how well the team worked together and with others, and more about kind of how they did towards the project objectives. Surveys would be administered by a consultant or staff member from the Human Resources Department. Survey results would assess the development of the team, its strengths and weaknesses, and lessons that can be applied to future project work. So again, a lot of this is going back to what can we learn from what we did to better do it in the future. We're not trying to hinder things or to point fingers. We're trying to learn for future. A sample of a team evaluation and what they would be looking at. So you can see much similar to how I score you guys on things. There would be some kind of rubric of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how things were, and then some questions about how things went. So the team shared a sense of common purpose, respect was shown, and all interaction among team members was comfortable, supportive environment. Individual team member and project manager performance reviews. So now we're doing performance reviews based on who was in the team, and you can do different ways of doing that. So you have your functional organization. I like, a balanced matrix approach, so the project manager and the area manager both jointly kind of discuss how they feel things went and how the team members performed, because they're both going to see different sides of how things happened. The functional manager is going to see what's specific to the area, and the project manager is probably going to see a greater view of what happened within the project and how the individuals within the project work together. Performance appraisals fulfill two important functions: development and evaluation. So development, focusing on identifying the individual strengths and weaknesses and developing action plans. Those in HR majors, organizational behavior, those kinds of things, I think a lot of these things will be familiar to you. And then the evaluation process. So focus on assessing how well a person has performed in order to determine salary or merit. And then you could have a multi-rater appraisal or a 360 feedback, which involves soliciting feedback not just from those managers, but also from the team members and people that their work affects. So a lot of the times people do this because you don't necessarily always get a direct view of how an organization sees you. And if you could have even just open feedback that's somewhat anonymous, you know where you need to grow and how people see your relationship. And sometimes it's just that we come across a certain way and maybe we need to work on how that is in order to better fit with our organization and our organizational culture. General tips for conducting performance reviews. Again, we're looking more at organizational behavior kind of things in our project management process now. So begin by asking the individual to evaluate themselves. Avoid drawing comparisons to other team members. So assess the individual based on standards and expectations rather than two people against each other. Focus the criticism on specific examples. And then we talk about it's constructive criticism, right? How could we as an individual perform better next time? Be consistent and fair in treatment of all team members. And that's why you want to have standards and expectations for them, and treat the review as only one point in an ongoing process. So you know that this project has happened and we're going to learn things from this, and a great way to think about it is make sure we're telling people, this is a growth experience. So what happened here, I'm not going to, if it was bad or even if it was good, I'm not going to hold that against you or put my expectations differently in the next project, but this is for you to help your performance within the organization improve based on what we know. So we're now done another chapter here, and we've closed out our project. We've done our lessons learned. We're going to then take that information and put it in the repository so we have it for future projects. We've talked about performance reviews, the project closure process, evaluation, the maturity model of where we are within our project management model, the retrospective approach of looking back, and then the 360 review process. So that one, I want you to remember thinking about the fact that a really good review is not just the functional manager or the project manager, but also having peers from your team and peers that were affected by the project involved. So we have a full view of how you were seen in the organization and how people felt about the interactions and how you performed and how it impacted them. And that's it for this chapter.